And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 155th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday evening, August 18th, 2020, where I am your host, Noah Freeman. On the docket for tonight, since football is at least postponed, not necessarily canceled, but as close to canceled as we can get, we are just going to forget about 2020 and look ahead to 2021, because I feel like all of us just need to start looking ahead to the new calendar year. So we're going to talk about, of course, since we had last talked, there has been a very big football recruit, big enough for where if you aren't even a football fan, you should get excited for. Maybe you should start watching a little bit of football, because this guy is a program changer in a number of different ways. So we're going to talk about football recruiting for 2021 and beyond, and then we are going to go into basketball recruiting. Same thing, 2021 and beyond. I feel like every podcaster is going to mess all of the dates up coming up here shortly. But so we're going to talk about football, basketball recruiting, and it's not going to be talking about maybe necessarily a bunch of guys that you didn't hear about, and this is going to be a boring podcast because you're not really into recruiting. I'm not necessarily into recruiting as much as other people, but we're going to try and make this podcast geared towards, hey, what can you get excited for after this season? But here with me tonight to break it all down, we've got Nathan and Matt. We're here for 2 weeks in a row. We'll have to see how all three of us can stay on, how many consecutive weeks. But how are you guys doing this evening?
I'm doing great. I mean, it's a beautiful night in Bloomington. The weather's cooled down just a little bit. In fact, the other day on a podcast note, I was going back and scanning through some of the in-season ones that we did. Feels like years and years ago now we were talking about the 2019 IU football season and then the ensuing basketball campaign that ended so abruptly. But those episodes were jam-packed, and crazy enough, I think we've got a pretty fun one loaded up for all of you tonight. Big recruiting news, like you touched on, Noah. Jaquez Smith, we'll tell you guys more about him soon. Georgia, wide receiver. Indiana continues to load up at that position, so really excited to dive in and talk about him, as well as a number of other football and basketball commitments and prospects that would join IU in the summer of 2021. So that's the plan coming up here. Matt, how are you doing on this Tuesday evening? What's Florida up to right now? Anything else fun or interesting going on?
Yeah, not too much interesting going on here, other than we've had some really bad storms the last couple of days. Typical Florida afternoon thunderstorms, and my dog has been having a rough time of it. So, keep my dog in your thoughts and prayers. He's really struggling with the thunder here. But no, I'm really excited to talk about recruiting. Again, I think everything you just touched on, again, right on the point. It's not really much you can say wrong about recruiting, other than, banking on a committing. It's probably not a great idea. But look, when you look to 2021 and further on for IU, both recruiting in basketball and in football, which is what we're going to talk about today, as I mentioned earlier, it looks really promising. There's a lot of really great in-state products that we're looking at, and there's a lot of out-of-state attention as well for both of these IU programs. Again, we'll talk about some of the out-of-state attention that the football program is well deserving of after last season, and that is getting in recruiting, such as this most recent commitment. So, Noah, I know I'm going to hand it back to you as a host, and let's get this thing started.
Well, first, Nathan, you set Matt up completely, and now Matt cannot talk about a certain game that happened today. So he is completely out. He does not get to brag whatsoever because he missed his chance, even though Nathan set him up perfectly talking about even what was going on in Florida, particularly southern Florida. So he missed his chance, and we're going to get on to IU football recruiting. And like Nathan said this past week, Jaquez Smith, technically the highest rated recruit that IU has ever gotten. And that's more of where you should start listening and perk your ears up if you didn't see any of that through social media. So Jaquez Smith on 24/7 Composite. And again, these recruiting rankings jump around 20,000 times. Currently, he's 173rd nationally on 24/7 Composite. But he has been as high as 58th. He was in the 80s for a couple weeks as well. In Georgia right now, or total, he's the 31st best wide receiver. Like I said, he's the highest IU rated recruit, barely. We'll see how he has to finish his season, but he edged out Samson James by .0003. And remember these weird rankings, they should have just done it out of 100 to get rid of all these decimal places, but he was basically 92.58 or .9258, and Samson James was .9255. So very close, but still kind of the Samson James caliber of recruit, which means you think higher rated recruit. That means these higher rated schools are going to go after him. Schools offered him schools like Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Michigan, Notre Dame, Clemson. That's actually a small list compared to what he was technically offered. IU is actually, I think, if you go and look at his list on 24/7, I think IU might be arguably one of the lowest, quote-unquote, lowest schools that offered him, I guess, compared to all the offers he was getting, just to kind of amp up more of how he was, the type of player that he is coming out of high school after his senior year, and even to where some of these national ranking leaders are almost even downplaying him a little bit from what he started out as. So, Nathan, what kind of recruit are we getting from Jaquez Smith?
Yeah, I mean, right now the stars are aligning for Jaquez. He's somebody who can be really, really good in Bloomington. Tom Allen's going to get a lot of credit. He's a 6'1", 190-pound receiver, all the talent in the world. At IU, guys like Whop Phillier and Ty Freifogel, who knows what's going to happen this upcoming season, but it is their senior year. I have no idea what's planned right now as far as the NCAA and the Big Ten rules as far as eligibility and scholarships are concerned. But if Phillier and Ty Freifogel move on and choose to pursue their NFL careers, well, all of a sudden you do have some spots opening on that depth chart. Rashawn Williams is an incoming freshman in 2020. You're going to have Jaquez Smith in 2021. And look, I can't continue without mentioning the level of importance that wide receivers coach Grant Hurd has for this coaching staff. If there's one guy on the staff whose name you should know outside of Tom Allen, it's Grant Hurd. And look, he's just come in and fortified and improved an already great position at IU, at least for IU standards. I mean, guys like Tandon Dawson, DeMarlo Belcher, and Cody Latimer were here in the last administration. Grant Hurd has come in, and he's really improved this wide receiving core. And the crazy part is his last job was at Ole Miss, where guys like DK Metcalf, just to name one, AJ Brown as well, he improved and developed those guys. Recruitment, development, Grant Hurd does it all. He's a superstar assistant coach, someone you should get to know. But Jaquez Smith, you can't say enough about him. He's got star potential. Matt, is there anything else that really stands out to you about Smith or Grant Hurd? I mean, what should we expect of Jaquez Smith as early as year one?
I mean, obviously, Grant Hurd is a standout. I think we've talked about that before. Many months ago, we went over the staff and improvements we could make and all that jazz. But when it comes to Jaquez Smith, according to 24/7 and their scouting report, they do an intense scouting report, especially of all the top players. Now that IU is getting into the realm of possibility of recruiting these guys, it's kind of fun to be able to read an in-depth sort of scouting report on each of our recruits. So Brandon Huffman, who's the national recruiting editor for 24/7, says he's a trusty receiver with good size and range, strong hands, and crisp route running. All pluses. We'll take that. Able to get yards after contact, difficult to press, which is great, and superb play strength to catch passes. That's great as well. Good body control and ability to adjust the throws, make a catch, and then cut and go. Not a true burner, so he's not the fastest wide receiver we've ever seen, but gets consistent separation, which is all you ask for from your wide receivers, especially when he's going to be coming in as a freshman and possibly Michael Penix's senior year. As long as he gets separation, a senior Michael Penix should be able to find him, and that's all you're asking for from a wide receiver. Projects as a multi-year Power 5 starter and the third-day NFL draft selection. That is about as good of a recruit as IU has ever gotten, obviously, by his recruiting ranking. But this guy has very highly touted and comes from Georgia 7A high school football, which is very good. People like Trevor Lawrence come from Georgia 7A high school football. So this is the level of talent that he's playing with every week and weekends down there in Georgia.
Yeah, I mean that's well said, Matt. And the crazy thing with Smith is that, I mean, it was not too long ago where a 4-star wide receiver would laugh at getting a phone call from IU. I mean, it would just be like, really? Like, are you serious? No, I'm gonna play at Alabama. I'm gonna go play at LSU, and we're gonna get more into the rest of the recruits here, and the first few guys we mentioned on our radar, they're in the same boat as Jaquez Smith. And I think we can almost get right into it with Donovan Mccully. I mean, we talked about Jaquez Smith, who committed to Indiana over the weekend. Donovan Mccully is an extremely exciting 4-star quarterback prospect. We're talking about an in-state kid who had offers from Iowa, Michigan State, Purdue, Missouri. He could have gone and played in the SEC. He could have gone and played for Kirk Ferentz. Instead, Indiana's really building something exciting. And that's what an 8-4 season will do here in Bloomington. So let's start with Donovan Mccully. I mean, dual threat QB. It doesn't look like he's going to start in year one, assuming Michael Penix sticks around. Especially, if Penix does go to the NFL, you still have Jack Tuttle on the roster. Mccully, Matt, what are you looking forward as far as the Lawrence North quarterback is considered?
Athleticism. He is an athlete at the quarterback position. He's able to run, and he has a shotgun for an arm. So he's extremely athletic. He's got to work on his accuracy, especially in short situations, 5 to 10 yard passes. But that guy can throw a deep ball and he can run. So he's going to be fun to watch. And at 6'5", he's the ideal height for a quarterback. So he's not a little bit smaller. He's going to be a little bit more built, especially with a college weight program. He's sitting at 195 at 6'5", which is skinny as all heck. But I'm sure once he gets in and hits that weight room underneath Memorial Stadium, he'll be fine, and he'll be a wonderful quarterback to watch at IU in the future. I'm not worried about him at all. So, Noah, how about
No, I mean...
Oh, you can go ahead.
No, I was just for Mccully more of, honestly, it's really hard to expect on any level, a first year, whether that's freshman or rookie, any position basically to come in, but especially at the quarterback to come in and really do something. That's kind of why you see Patrick Mahomes, a guy that was able to sit on the bench and get a lot of good experience. And then his first year where he was throwing the ball and starting as a quarterback, obviously, is one for potential history books. So so sitting out a year is potentially a good thing, especially to learn from a guy like, and again, not comparing Michael Penix to Patrick Mahomes, but just saying that Michael Penix being obviously one of the better quarterbacks that the Indiana football team has seen, it definitely wouldn't hurt when especially Donovan Mccully is maybe built a little closer to someone like Michael Penix compared to maybe recent quarterbacks that Indiana has had. So learning under him, getting a year under his belt, and then seeing what happens, like potentially, like you said, Nathan, in a couple of years, we could see, it'd be interesting to see if we're talking about Jack Tuttle and Donovan Mccully for that starting spot, kind of like the Peyton Ramsey, Michael Penix thing.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. And you were talking about some of the older Indiana quarterbacks. Jumping into the time machine here, I remember a matchup back in, I think it was 2011 or 2012 when Trey Roberson took IU down to Columbus to take on Braxton Miller in Ohio State. And that was a matchup of two true freshman quarterbacks. And that had not been and a big matchup of two true freshman quarterbacks. It had not been seen in years, if not decades, in the Big Ten. I mean, it's extremely rare for a quarterback to get playing time, let alone start frequently as a true freshman in the Big Ten. But, no question about it. If Penix and Tuttle are in the same room, even if it's one of the two, he's going to get up to speed pretty quickly.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Now, those are the two 4-star commits, and it's crazy to think like 3 years ago, Matt, when we started this podcast together, could you imagine just talking about not only like we would be just really like trying to get after even just getting the potential, like offering one 4-star player, and now we're talking about two 4-star commits on this team. And so that's why we kind of hovered around, because they are very important. And it's really hard to think of right now, these seniors in high school, the potential they can do in a few years. But like, this is think of this program now in that 8-4 team with 2 to 3-star, with maybe 1 4-star recruits when they were coming out of high school, and now they're on this Hoosier team a few years later. Now think of the talent that is just building with this, that Tom Allen is continuing to just build this all around program, and it's just coming after. It's like everyone's like, Archie Miller's doing this really good recruiting, so is Tom Allen with all of this. And for these next few players, and we're not going to talk about every individual player because it would kind of get a little boring, honestly, talking about every player. But if you look at the overall team recruiting rankings right now, Indiana is lower on the list currently, just because they don't have a sheer number of 3-star commits like other schools have currently. So don't see, Indiana's, I think they're like 53rd or something currently, somewhere around there. But if you look at the schools around them, no other school has 2 4-star commits. They've got like 15, 16, 17 3-star commits, and that's why their quote unquote score is higher. But out of these other 3-star commits that Indiana has for the class of 2021, Nathan, you've got people like a D-line safety, you've got an offensive lineman, running back, tight end, a wide receiver. You've actually got a bunch of positions. Out of all of those 3-star commits, who do you think maybe not necessarily should be a 4-star recruit, but you're just as excited for someone like Jaquez Smith coming up in a couple of years?
Yeah, I'm just going to take the next guy on the list, in all honesty, and that's Cooper Jones. I'm a little biased with Cooper Jones. He's a Valparaiso kid, Northwest Indiana. I was born and raised in Munster, the region. So I'm always going to side with the guy from Northwest Indiana. But in all seriousness, he's already 6'6", 245. And you're telling me he's still got another year left of high school. And then he's going to come into Bloomington, where Tom Allen and Kane Womack are going to make sure he's going to put in the reps in the weight room. By the time his freshman season rolls around, he's going to be in game shape, ready to go, if they call on his name. And if they don't, and if he's got to maybe redshirt a year like Bo Robbins did this past season for IU, when fall 2022 rolls around, Cooper Jones, I think, will be almost a shoe-in starter on the defensive line. He and Donovan McCully are 2 of the 4 highest rated Indiana prospects in the class of 21. And so for Tom Allen to go out there and nail down 1 offensive guy and 1 defensive guy in that top 4, that's pretty exciting. I think the 2 other prospects are going to like Notre Dame and Missouri or something like that. So Allen has positioned himself really nicely there as far as locking down the state. Cooper Jones, 3-star player, top 500 type of guy nationally. In-state kid, Northwest Indiana, defensive lineman. Remember the name. He's going to have some highlights if this high school season goes off without a snag. So keep your eyes out for the YouTube and the Twitter videos for Cooper Jones.
Matt, is there a particular guy out of some of those 3-star athletes that's not Cooper Jones that you are getting excited for to get onto campus?
Sure. I really like Aaron Steinfeld from Bloomington North High School. Big tight end, 6'5", 230. He's a Bloomington kid, commits to IU, had offers from Boise State and Cincinnati, decided to come to IU. He's 28th overall for tight ends in the class. But again, 6'5" as a high school junior, going to be a senior, 230 pounds. I really like where the direction that Tom Allen is bringing this tight end room and bringing in state kids.
Yeah.
Now, I'm trying to think of, so we forgot to mention that the high school, Westlake High School in Atlanta, I think, did you guys mention this? I had to pop out for a second. The other NFL prospects that have come from there.
No,
No.
it's all yours, Noah. Do you want to take a shot at it?
Well, it's Cam Newton, and I can't remember the other person. Who is the other person that came from that high school?
Ooh, man, you know what? Off the top of my head, I cannot remember that. But hey, look,
I saw a tweet, and I thought it was in our Twitterverse or something.
The funny thing is, let's just hit the pause on it for just a second, because we're talking about Westlake High School in Georgia, and we're saying Cam Newton. Oh, and there's some other NFL guys too, like Cam Newton alone. Like Cam Newton alone should be more than enough to say, wow, like Matt was talking about earlier. Okay, you've got a 7A Georgia high school, Trevor Lawrence, that type of division. Cam Newton went to that high school. We know where he is now. Well, he's in New England now, but we know the type of journey he's been on as far as getting to the Super Bowl and all the hype and the Heisman and everything. So Cam Newton alone says a whole lot about the type of high school that Jaquez Smith is coming from.
Oh, it was Pac-Man Jones. That's who it was.
Yes.
Someone that I'm not.
I was wondering if that was who you're asking about.
Yes, that's who.
And AJ Terrell.
Yep.
And AJ Terrell.
Yep, and a couple of like Kieran Fox, the Super Bowl champion, Anthony Mitchell, Super Bowl champion. They have 6 former alumni that have been on NFL rosters. So this is a pretty high-powered, like Matt said, a pretty high-powered Georgia program. I'm going to give you, Matt, is there anyone else you want to sum up for our 2021 commits before we move on to our next segment?
I mean, there's not anybody I want to specifically go over, but I really like this class. And as you scroll down, and you were talking about it earlier when we were reminiscing about when we first started this podcast, we would be happy if we had players to talk about in the thousands, right? We'd be happy if there was like
Cooper
an
Jones
upper
was our top recruit, yeah.
Right. If not even Cooper Jones, I mean, like if like Aaron Steinfeld was our top recruit, like 735, and like that's a good 3-star recruit. We'll take that. And now he is Aaron Steinfeld's like our seventh best recruit in this class,
Yeah.
and we're 11th overall in the Big Ten.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and again, when you see the 11th overall in the Big Ten, you go, wow, we're that low with these recruits. Like, okay, but we have a very small class for a football recruit. I believe currently we have, I think it's 16.
Yeah, 16 total commits. I think it's 2 4-star, 10 3-star currently. So, and again, remember, not everyone is rated like kickers and punters and long snappers. Like those guys aren't even, they don't bother putting stars on them. So it doesn't necessarily even mean that those other couple of recruits are quote unquote bad players, which is a gross over exaggeration. But the last thought that I had from this 2021 class is you kind of see, and again, this is kind of comparable to basketball with Archie Miller, and you think of where is Archie Miller recruiting and where is he kind of trying to make sure that these classes continue to be strong, and where is this big pool of players coming from. And this is, so we talked about Jaquez Smith being from Atlanta and Donovan McCully being from Lawrence North in Indianapolis. So then you've got a lot of the other recruits. So I'll just list off a couple of states. So we got like Nathan said, Valparaiso for Cooper Jones, and Aaron Steinfeld, like Matt said, Bloomington, Indiana. Great Indiana recruits. You also got another one from Brownsburg. So that's recruiting locally, but he's also not staying locally too much, because football, you obviously can't stay in Indiana too much to be able to have a very successful program. But then you've got Florida, Illinois, Florida, Texas, Michigan, another Fort Wayne, and then Virginia, the Chesapeake, Virginia, which actually has a few good recruits, which Indiana has actually had some recruits from Virginia in that area as well. So just thinking of even just geographically, that was a bunch of different places. He's pulling from Florida, which everyone knew, at least knowing Tom Allen's recruiting strategies. He's been able to pull some very good recruits from Florida. You've got he's starting to pull in from Texas, which is a great place, obviously, to try and pull from, which we haven't seen a lot of Texas recruits from him. Michigan, that's 2 years in a row that he's had a Michigan recruit. And then you've got, he's staying in Virginia. He's got a couple spots in Virginia too that he's liked. But do you guys have any thoughts about Nathan, about his specific placement before you can tell us who won the week?
Yeah, I do. And you even mentioned it. You touched on it for a moment there with the kid from Brownsburg, Joshua Sales, 6'6" offensive tackle. He's already 285, from from the state. And look, I talked about it with the defensive line, so I'm going to talk about it with the offensive line because we know how important the trenches are in the Big Ten. Joshua Sales is somebody who's recruited by Arizona State. He was called on by Cincinnati and Maryland and Michigan State. Big body up front. I honestly think he'll be ready to go from day one when he comes onto campus about a year from now. One other player I wanted to mention, MJ Daniels. He hasn't committed to Indiana yet, but he's somebody for all of you Hoosier fans to keep an eye out for. He's a 6'3" athlete / corner defensive back. He's from Mississippi, and Indiana is on his short wish list. Indiana's right now competing with a few other big-time schools in the SEC, Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee. This is a great opportunity for Jason Jones, the new safeties coach, to really make an impact on the recruiting trail. If you looked on Twitter the other day, MJ Daniels actually used the LEO hashtag in a completely unsolicited sort of impromptu, spontaneous tweet. So that type of stuff is always fun to see if you're an IU football fan. Of course, Indiana right now has got some really nice youth in the secondary with Tywan Mullen and Reese Taylor. So that secondary could be really impressive once 2021 or 22 roll around.
Exactly. And I was actually looking at the 24/7 sports thing, looking at by position. I got all the states, but by position, and we were talking about those couple non-rated recruits. And guess what? They're special teams. So really, when Tom Allen's hitting currently, he's hitting some good recruits, which is not even what he came into the program with. But exactly, there's not going to be for prospects. What Nathan said, there's not going to particularly be. We're not going to get another 4-star recruit. It looks like from the short lists and the interests. At least don't assume that. But there are a couple really good Cooper Jones level 3-star athletes that could fringe on 4-star that are still looking to go to Indiana. And again, it's pretty early. Right? It's mid-August, and these are the guys that are going to be graduating at the end of this next school year. But Nathan, give us some good news this week on who won the week for IU sports.
Yeah, big day yesterday, and yesterday for us is Monday, as we're doing this live on Tuesday night. On Monday afternoon, the first NBA playoff game of the postseason, Juwan Morgan was called upon by his head coach Quinn Snyder in sort of an emergency start role. Mike Conley, the usual starter, had to leave the bubble for the birth of his first child. The Indianapolis native left the bubble to welcome his son or his daughter. I don't know which one it is. His child. But Quinn Snyder called upon Juwan Morgan to start for the Jazz. And look, sometimes, you get sort of a token start in the NBA where maybe you play for 5 or 6 minutes and then they bring in sort of a more talented bench player to play the rest of the game. Nope. Not the case yesterday for Morgan, who totaled a career high 25 minutes. He had a pretty standout 7 rebound performance, a team high plus 17. The Jazz fell short in overtime, but it was an overtime where Juwan Morgan didn't play a second. And there are some Jazz fans who are wondering, hey, could Utah have won that game if Morgan had gotten some playing time in overtime? They opted to play Royce O'Neal instead. O'Neal ended up minus 21 on the night. Not like I'm counting. But Juwan Morgan undoubtedly won the week. He didn't play much all season really until the bubble, and in the last 10 days or so, the Jazz have really called his name and his number quite a bit. So, no question about it. Juwan Morgan won the week, and the plan is for him to start tomorrow's game too. So keep an eye out for him there as well.
Think about Juwan Morgan when he first was trying to get into the NBA. Hoosier fans were just hoping that he'd even find a team, and the best case scenario would be that two-way player going back and forth, which is what he was. And then, like Nathan said, here we are, the first playoff game, and he's starting, which is incredible. And just congratulations for him, if anything. He didn't score too many points. He only scored 3 points, which is probably why they weren't playing him too much. But like Nathan said, hey, sometimes plus minus does affect things. But let's get into the basketball segment of this. And of course, for basketball currently, there's not too much to look for on the current class of 2021 because of course the only commit for the class of 2021 as of Tuesday evening August 18th is Logan Duncombe, which we have talked about before, so probably most of this segment is going to be focusing on some of the recruits that they could potentially get and some of the just maybe where Indiana's program with Archie Miller could be going here on out. So Matt, why don't you kick us off with just your thoughts on starting to look at 2021 and beyond?
Sure. So I can start with the 2021 class. 2022 and 2023 get very interesting again because it's so early in the recruiting process. Normally at this point in time, we'd be getting a lot more information on the 2022 recruiting class thanks to the AAU season. A lot of offers would be extended to players that we'd be finding as a high priority for the staff. And then we'd be introduced to some of the names of the 2023 class, like in-state recruits, and then some recruits that may have connections to the program. But since there hasn't been much of an AAU season this year, we're sitting here without a lot of information. However, we still have some. And so we're going to share that with you. But we're going to start with 2021. And there's a couple names you need to know in the 2021 class that haven't committed. Right? We just talked about Logan Duncombe. He's in the back. He's sitting there. He's waiting for his friends to hop in the car with him. So his car mates could be Blake Leslie, who's a shooting guard, 6'4", 170 from South Bend Riley in South Bend, Indiana. A very hot prospect, very underrated prospect, in my opinion. Somebody that would have really benefited from competing in the EYBL for Indy Elite in the EYBL circuit, the Indiana Nike version, Indianapolis. It's the Indy Heat. That's an Indy Elite, but it's Indy Heat program. That program developed people like Greg Oden and Mike Conley, and basically all the last couple really good superstars come out of Indiana, other than Romeo, whose dad was in charge of his AAU team. But he's somebody that would have benefited from the promotion that the AAU would have given him. Probably would have jumped in the recruiting rankings. He's sitting there at nationally 109th. I think he probably, with a good summer, would have ended up in the late upper 60s, early 70s in the recruiting rankings. That's a 30-point hike, but that's the talent he has. He can create his own shot. He's got some bounce to him. He's got to get a little bit. He's got to get his dribble under control. He's got to clean that up a bit. But it's somebody you're going to be looking for. Aminu Muhammad is also somebody you're looking for out of the Maryland area. I guess he goes to he was originally from Maryland in the DC area. Now he goes to Greenwood Laboratory School in Springfield, Missouri. He's a prep school kid. But he's at 6'4". He's a bit smaller for a small forward. He doesn't have a great shot. He's not much of a shooter, but his ball handling and his ability to finish through contact and at the rim is second to none, maybe, in this recruiting class. He is very good and adept at getting in and around the rim. That's why he's a top 10 recruit. Really good at finishing through contact and a very, very tough defender. So those are two names. And then the big name you do need to know out of everybody is Trey Kaufman. He's a 6'8" power forward from Silver Creek in high school in Sellersburg, Indiana. He is a stretch four. He is well known. His ability to shoot, put the ball on the floor, post up. He's an all around offensive weapon. He got to work a little bit on his defensive end, on the defensive side of the floor. And at 6'8", he's probably not going to be playing center. Hence why we got somebody like Logan Duncombe coming in with him to play center. But he is a prospect to look out for sure. Is there anybody that I missed?
Man, that was Matt. You should be you're the Indiana HQ recruiting guy now. That's it.
It was very basic. It was very basic, but yeah.
There's really one other player that I wanted to shout out, and that was Mason Miller. And there was some news about Mason Miller recently. IU's really pushing after him. Another power forward, shooter type player. He's from the Houston area. I'm sorry, from the Germantown, Tennessee. So he's from the South, essentially. Mason Miller, good shooter. You can never have enough jump shooting on your roster. A couple other notes. Blake Wesley's going to cut down his list coming up soon. So keep an eye out for that if you're a Hoosier fan. Again, as Matt mentioned, in-state kid. Aminu Mohammed's not going to make his decision until the winter. But what's interesting there is you're talking about a 5-star, wing player. I don't know if this is the best comparison, but he reminds me a little bit of Romeo Langford, not a carbon copy, just reminds me a little bit of him. Everyone just take a deep breath. I'm not saying they're the exact same. You're just that caught my eye. Muhammad is a guy right now who's pretty much limited his list to Indiana, Maryland, Kansas State, Louisville, and possibly Georgetown. I mean, that's the kind of competition Indiana has for this guy. IU's very much in the mix for him. Really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there. And really, Matt, out of all these guys here, who's the one player that you would want to join IU's team in a year from now? And remember, more than one guy can undoubtedly join this roster. IU's going to have 3 scholarships open for the fall of 2021. So who's the one guy you're keeping an eye out for, Matt? As far as this list is concerned.
Well, in my opinion, if this year goes to as planned, this roster will have 4 spots open because Trey Jackson-Davis will be heading to the NBA.
That's right.
So with that being said, there's a need for somebody like Trey Kaufman to come in and fill in that role that Trey Jackson-Davis leaves. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be Trey Jackson-Davis. That would just be wrong. Okay, you can't place that burden on anybody. However, that being said, he would play the same position. He'd offer a little bit of what Trace offers on offense and defense, but also add something new, like a shooting from that position from the 3-point line. We'll see what Trace does this year with that. But yeah, Trey Kaufman would be my pick for that. However, something you didn't mention with Mason Miller when we were talking about him, Mike Miller is his father. So when we are talking about shooting, he gets some good shooting practice at home as well. So This is the type of recruit we're talking about. Son of an NBA player, a 6'9" son of an NBA player.
Are you talking about potential? We're not going to get into it. Potential future IU assistant coach Mike Miller, Matt. Is that who you're talking about?
I mean, that was a topic that was thrown around for this podcast, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's staying at home, spend more time with his family. That would be a thing. That would be fun, though. That'd be a lot of fun. We're a lot of fun time.
We're not going to dig into that, but there is a connection there. I'll answer my own question. Aminu Mohammed is the guy I want, and I know it's like not a hot take at all, but you're talking 5-star wing player, 5-star wing player, somebody who I'm just speculating IU is either in the lead or close to the lead in order to grab him. If you're digging into the depth chart in a scholarship situation, Al Durham is a senior next year. It's a pretty like-for-like replacement with Muhammad. So that's my pick there. I'm going to turn the question to you, Noah. Out of Aminu Mohammed or Trey Kaufman, Mason Miller, Blake Wesley, who's the guy that you want out of that 4?
Well, first, I apologize. I'm trying not to get as choppy. My computer decided to update right before we hopped on here, and adding on that, I've got a new setup. I added a couple things which would help, but currently, obviously, the first time is working against me. But you guys, of course, mentioned a lot of the big people, and you got to, Matt, it's hard not to just think about Mason Miller, Mike Miller. Could both of them come to the Hoosiers? I mean, it's possible. Not yet, but that'd be really funny if they were both able to come. But we are purposefully not talking about the new opening on the Hoosier basketball staff because we just might as well talk about it more when that position is filled, so we can kind of spend a little more time on it instead of just chunk it up. But no, we did not miss a crucial part of news over the past week and a half with the basketball team. But speaking to the The recruits itself, Aminu Muhammad went to Archbishop Carroll High School before he went to that Greenwood Laboratory School in Springfield, Missouri. And Archbishop, there are a lot of I'll say this, there are a lot better private schools, and around the DC area, private schools are actually the better for sports. It's the other way around from what I've heard in Indiana, where Indiana, the public schools are better sports, public schools are better sports, a little worse academics, and vice versa for private schools. It's the other way around here. Those private schools are where all of those really athletic and talented kids go. So there are better private schools that he could have gone to, but that's kind of why Maryland's going to be interesting and be a really big matchup for Indiana in terms of recruiting for him, because he went right there. And then Nathan even talked about Georgetown, who might not necessarily be on his list in the forefront, but in Georgetown glory days, he probably would be going right there, since he grew up literally right next to Georgetown being in DC itself. But I would probably go Aminu Muhammad, the guy. But I mean, you guys are asking me, hey, one or the other. I mean, we're gonna get both, right? And then but the two guys I did want to talk about, just to remind us how this whole class is shaping up in general. Remember, two guys that Indiana did not get, and not necessarily a bad thing, because we didn't necessarily think Indiana would get them, but Trey Patterson, of course, committed obviously a little while ago to Villanova, and Caleb First went to Purdue, two guys that were on Indiana's radar. But remember, you can't get everyone, so just reminding us, since I know recruiting is kind of blocked out of my mind, since over the summer we get to hear all of this news like you guys talked about with the circuits and the extra playing. It's kind of like refreshing my memory, so hopefully it's refreshing your guys' memory as well. Let's take a quick pause before we finish up with our basketball segment and the podcast. Matt, give us our social media shout out for this week.
Yeah, my social media shout outs real quick and real easy. We're shouting out Jaquez Smith on social media. If you didn't see his announcement, go click the like button, say hi, whatever. Just be nice.
Follow him.
I'm sure you'll be nice. Follow him. I don't know. Do your thing, Hoosier Nation. But his Twitter is Jaquez Smith 21 on Twitter. Really easy to find. His commitment is his posted tweet, or his pinned tweet up at the top. So go like that. He's like retweeting all the articles about him. So if you want to see any more information on him or the video that he had,
I would too, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd be really excited.
Yeah.
But you want to see the Rivals video on him committing and putting on the hat, which looks really nice. It looks great. The IU hat. Go and check him out on Twitter, and then check our partners at Indiana HQ out on Twitter. You can't check us out on Twitter because Twitter hates us, but you can check our partners and our friends at Indiana HQ.
Gosh, don't get me started. I'm just going to continue on move on to Nathan. Give us your maybe not necessarily final, but kind of wrap up thoughts on where you see this class could be going, and where maybe it kind of leads Indiana towards the future. Because of course it's kind of hard to speculate the specific team even next year, but where do you think this class could potentially go, and how it could help Archie Miller further his career with Indiana?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a numbers guy. I've always been a numbers guy. In 2019, IU ranked somewhere in the 50s in men's basketball recruiting, even with Trace Jackson Davis coming to town. This upcoming freshman class for fall 2020, all the way up to number 16 right now, according to 24/7 Sports, second best class in the Big Ten. As we talked about, with the scholarship situation as open as it is, with 3 at least opening up, and then maybe probably Trace Jackson Davis's scholarship opening up as well. You almost have 4 open spots for 4 possible 4-star and above recruits. It's beautiful how that works out sometimes. So Archie Miller and Tom Ostrom and the rest of Indiana's assistant coaching staff can really bring it home. So that, in the spring of 21, hopefully we're talking about IU making into the NCAA tournament. And in spring of 22, hopefully we're talking about a really deep run. Also, last thing I want to say, just to toot Indiana HQ, our own horn a little bit, Juwan Morgan, after having a solid playoff game in his debut, just decided to like our tweet from yesterday, honoring his accomplishments. So, look, if Juwan Morgan can like our tweets over at Indiana HQ, the least you guys can do is follow us. And if you do follow us, tell someone else to follow us. It's pretty fun.
Matt, give us. You said 4 open spots. You've got one. Who would, I mean, be realistic, not necessarily who you want, but who you want / who do you think those other 3 spots? I've got something, and then give us your wrap up thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So those 3 spots for me. So you have Logan Duncombe. That's one. So you got 3 extra spots. Honestly, I'm looking at Blake Wesley as one of them. I do think Aminu Muhammad will eventually commit. I think he's going to see that it's a really good situation for him as a playmaker and having 3-point shooting around him. I know IU having 3-point shooting, shocker. And then Trey Kaufman. So those are the 3 players I want. I think we'll get all 3 of them. I think we're in a fantastic place with Trey Kaufman. I think we're in a good place with Blake Wesley. There's still some room to be added from schools like Purdue and Notre Dame. And then Aminu Muhammad, I think we're in a great place with him. I think we've obviously made him a priority. Quickly, I know it's a little bit off topic, but I did mention the 2022 class. So I will mention one name so that we can say we mentioned the future of IU basketball recruiting. And that would be Jalen Washington from Westside Gary High School in Gary, Indiana. 17th overall nationally, 5-star recruit as a power forward, 6'8" as a high school sophomore. I almost said college sophomore, high school sophomore. So there's still room for him to grow. Kind of short little scouting report on him. He's got great size, big hands, and athletic at the power forward position. And if he grows a little bit more, he end up being a fantastic college center. Currently, Indiana has offered him along with Louisville. So this is the caliber of recruits that Archie Miller has been recruiting and will continue to recruit, and what we have to look forward to as an IU basketball fan.
So, Matt, I asked you that because the 24/7 Sports website has a calculator that you can do. They do all of their algorithms and everything, and when you add players, you can say, all right, I think these players are going to commit to Indiana, so I put them in there to see what Indiana's score is, and then put it up against the basketball team rankings. Now, currently with one player, and it's kind of almost sadly a numbers game in terms of how many recruits you have for what your ranking is. So currently, obviously, with one recruit, Indiana's at 55th on the 24/7 Sports composite overall out of the nation, which is, again, you look at all the teams around there, one recruit.
It's way too early.
You go up, and again, yeah, but if all 4 of those guys commit, technically, at this point, they would have the second best recruiting class in the entire nation. Now, again, it's early, so other teams will still have some players to go up there for. But currently, the top ranking teams have 5. Florida State with 5 commits, Villanova with 4 commits, Baylor 3, Michigan State 3. All of these teams already have a bunch of commits currently, so it's not like Indiana would be too far. Like, it's not like these guys would be at Michigan State would be adding 3 or 4 more commits more than likely. So they'd actually be in the realm in terms of numbers around where these programs are, so that Indiana would probably more than likely have a top 10 nationally, top 15 at worst, I would think, if those 3 players, in addition to Logan, were able to get recruited by Archie Miller and this team, which, of course, I think we've seen a lot of really good Archie Miller recruiting classes, but those rankings sometimes don't necessarily factor into it as much, because you've seen recent IU classes, like Nathan said, that haven't been ranked high nationally, and then add some of those. You've seen Archie that can get some good recruits, that we've seen some talent on the floor. Now get even the numbers aspect to it and see what kind of program he has. Matt, do you have any last second thought, or I didn't know if you wanted to say something.
No, I mean, you basically hit it. I'm really excited about IU basketball recruiting, and I could talk about this for hours, but people have stuff to do, so we're going to let you go.
So there's some excitement, since we're of course going to be on this entire journey of college-less sports, at least for the foreseeable future. So that's going to wrap it up for 155th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to the live audience, of course, as always, for participating in the chat. We really appreciate that support. News and updates Twitter, Indiana HQ right now, so subscribe so you don't miss out on our weekly shows. But most importantly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review. Tell a friend, share our links. Your support is really how we grow this podcast so we can reach all those passionate IU fans such as yourself. But as always,